welcome everybody to this very relaxed chat with two wonderful, magnificent comrades. That's something that we've been talking about for a while, and considering we have a day off with the Socially Sunday stream because we're taking a couple of weeks off every now and then. But we're doing this wonderful format, which is called Casual Comrades. Well, we grab some comrades and we just have a nice talk. So welcome Cassiopeia, welcome Michaela Smith. And we got our wonderful guests here. So we have Melanie. Say hello to our peoples.
Hello. So fast. My name is Melanie. I am a Marxist Leninist. I live in the middle of the United States, and I basically just talk about person of color stuff and sort of the state of the United States as through the framework and lens of someone who kind of lives in this hellhole, and that's really it. I have a Twitter. I talk about stuff sometimes. I go and I'm in like semi-involved in like the Twitch panel scene and like the politics, like and like sort of like the more liberal politics on the left to try and like talk about like Marxist ideas to people that don't get it. I try really hard. It's difficult. That's really it. My intros are always so bad. I'm so sorry.
You're fantastic and we love you. And like you said before, the United States is having a normal today.
Yeah, it's having a super normal one today.
And we have
also,
Melody. We have Melody with us from World to Win. Say hello and
hello
to these people, fantastic people here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melody, she/her pronouns, Marxist-Leninist, trans woman living in the United States, and I have a YouTube channel called A World to Win, where I talk about history, political economy, philosophy, and sometimes current events through a Marxist-Leninist kind of framework. And I'm frequently collaborating with other creators like Labor Kyle, Young Simba, Izzy Does Everything, Melanie here. We have a on and off stream thing on my channel. And yeah, I'm all about spreading Marxist education through digital media, which, I think is really important. So that's what I do.
Well, and as you both are in the United States, how are you hanging in there? Because I'm here all comfortable in Spain, which is like falling apart more slowly. But I think you are under heavy fire right now, right?
Are we allowed to talk about this? Would you let me talk about it? Is that okay? Is anyone?
I have no objections.
Of course.
Okay.
We're hanging out.
Okay, so I live in a relatively I live in middle America, and I live in a relatively small town in terms of like, it's like when most people think of like a big city, you think of like New York and Chicago and Houston. So I basically live in a metro of about 1 million people. Our police isn't like too big. We have like a pretty diverse city. Like there's not a lot. Like not a lot really happens here. But there was a small protest that I went to during the day, and then we ended up leaving because we kind of figured that nothing was going to happen, just because like nothing really happens in the city that I live in. Like it's just relatively quiet. And then about 2 hours after we left, about 200 officers chased down about 70 people and pushed them out of downtown, and were throwing flashbangs, like, and macing children. Like they were just, people were protesting, I think, for about 12 hours. They just kind of stood there and hung out and yelled things on a bullhorn outside of the like central police department office. Like it's just an old historical brick building. And I don't know what happened. A bunch of people that I know that were there told me that they just told people to leave, and then when people were like, okay, they were just deliberating on what to do, or they were just yelling, phrases and protest lines, they just started delivering non-lethal force. The town that I grew up in had a sit-in on a public intersection. So like it's like an intersection on a part of the it wasn't a highway, but it's just like a part of town. It's like a major cross section in town, and a bunch of people just sat on the ground and were holding signs. And a line of police in full riot gear, like secondarily armed with like assault rifles with live rounds, walked up to a bunch of people and just started macing people and shooting rubber bullets point blank and throwing flashbangs at people. And these are like a couple towns in the Midwest that are relatively small compared to like Chicago, Minneapolis. Like these aren't like a few. These aren't like a few million people cities. These are like less. Like the actual like metro is probably like 500,000 people. So it's not. I don't know. I was just really surprised to see it like in my hometown, and I was really surprised to see it in the town that I've called my home for about 5 years now. It's just really sort of depressing because I never thought it would happen here, and I think that sort of answers the question. Like, it doesn't really matter what town you're from. Like, this is overwhelmingly like a bad aggressive force to like the sovereignty and people's rights, and like we have military lockdowns because like I live in a town with like a with a National Guard base. So I don't know how bad things are going to get going forward, but I don't know. America's just having a normal one.
I mean, what a bunch of cowards! Like they when people are armed and there's a lot of people, they go like ooh, they retreat and they let them do. But when it's a few people, and when it's peaceful and there's no difficulty to it, they go all full strength and trying to torture these people. It looks like there's like let's say a bit of a sadistic way to it, right?
100%.
How did it go on your end, Melody?
So I'm home with immunocompromised people, so I have not been in the loop as far as the protests in Portland go. But I have comrades who were down there, and they reported that it was some of the biggest protests that they've ever seen in Portland, which is that's nothing to shake a stick at, because Portland has some pretty big and scary protests, especially in the last couple of years. But yeah, frankly, I'm probably not the best person to relay information about that because I was not there and I don't have real comprehensive information about what happened. But yeah, just I guess a more general comment is that I've observed that the narrative around a lot of these protests from the liberal media has been that like, oh, the protests are good, but all the violence is actually being caused by outside agitators. I mean, that's just like baloney, fucking like counterintelligence 101 for authoritarian regimes that are trying to control the conversation. It's always about displacing blame for violence on outside agitators and the good protesters versus bad protesters dichotomies to control the narrative and deflate the militancy of the protests. And like, I think one thing that we should be careful about is that like, yeah, provocateurs and outside agitators are definitely a thing, but like that's not the outsized influence here, and we shouldn't lose sight of the bigger picture in light of that.
Yeah, that's important. The bigger picture, right? Because when you see the information, mostly, I mean, I get most of my information from social media, from trusted sources, if possible, and mainly leftists. And what I see is a lot of the action happening, but there's no bigger picture to be offered right now on social media as things unravel or unveil, and it's fine. There's probably a bit of a let's say spontaneous ingredient to this, like the latest death, the latest straw. Like we say in Spanish here, la gota que colma el vaso. It's just like the last drop that overflows the glass, right? So, but there has to be a bigger picture. There has to be a way. There has to be a way to make these things happen to our advantage. And to say, I mean, for sure, the image of the police towards the public is being, let's say, the veil of good guys that what we were mentioning before has been really lifting off and showing the true face of the, say, these forces of terror. On the positive side, both Cassiopeia and Lorcan Nagel have said, like, in the UK and Ireland, there are movements to try and support the protest, the Black Lives Matter movement, and so on, which is fantastic. So the world is watching, I must say. You know, as someone from outside of the United States, I can tell you that the world is watching, that we are taking notes and saying, you know, this is what's going on.
I'm sorry, I'm like eating at the time because I kind of had to eat over there.
Don't worry.
So I have something really important. I think I want to say to anyone that is outside of the United States or lives in Europe. I think there is this giant misconception of how we view race and how we view police. I've gotten in a lot of really heated discussions with Europeans that think that whenever Americans are talking about race or police, that we are being Amerocentric and not thinking about the power dynamics and racialized conditions of whiteness within the framework of Europe. And I think that's a very like cop-out kind of statement to say, because the American police is nothing like the ones in Hong Kong or France or Spain. The American military police state, the surveillance apparatuses, the things that are used against regular citizens is nothing like anything that is used in Europe, and even probably even by the Chinese. That's a super controversial thing to say. I'm not going to like deliver an opinion about necessarily like my take on the HK protests or like protests in Europe, because like that's a can of worms in and of itself. But what I will say is I think a lot of Europeans and a lot of non-Americans, or like especially like Europeans of color, don't understand that like if you are a person of color and you live in the United States, your life is a living fucking hell, not because of necessarily institutions, but also the defense of those institutions, which is definitely the police, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. Like historically, if you go from almost every single time there is a white supremacist or like a cult leader in a compound doing something that people don't like,
Yeah.
the FBI does hostage investigations. They like are they send out hostage negotiators. They investigate these people. They take really long, like standoff points to try and like tell these people to stop. But if you're like a black person and you're doing like something like this, or a Latinx person, you are going to be met with force almost every single time. They're not going to negotiate with you. They're not going to try and calm you down. They're literally going to set up riot police. They're going to throw water cannons. Like, I don't know if anyone has heard about the MOVE bombing in Philadelphia, but that's a perfect example of a bunch of black folks that just wanted to just live their lives. Yeah, they're a bunch of Anprims. They're kind of weird, but like they don't deserve that treatment. Even if I don't necessarily like those people, they don't deserve any of the things that happened to them based purely on because they were black. And then America has a large issue with how it treats like ethnic minorities in this country. Like, they will never be met with that same reciprocity as Waco. Now, do I think the Branch Davidians should have died in that fire? No. Were they doing things that were kind of sus? Yeah, but the problem is, but the issue is still the same thing at hand, is police confrontation will always end in violence. The issue that I have is the violence always starts first and at a way faster pace with people of color and marginalized like queer folk than it ever does white folks. Yeah. The Waco hostage situation was 51 days or something like that. Like, they literally put a martial law lockdown on Minneapolis in less than like 72 hours.
Yeah,
they give us no quarter. They don't care.
And you know, the similar can be said here in Oregon back in 2016. There was the Malheur County takeover by right-wing militia that lasted, I think, like at least a month. I can't remember offhand, but they were treated with absolute kid gloves. And it wasn't until kind of the climax, I guess, or the end of the occupation that there was a shootout, and one of them was shot dead. One of them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and you know, to put it like a very simple
I'll
way.
be right back, by the way. Sorry.
No worries. And to put it in a very simple way, like here in Europe, you know, there's also racial profiling and stuff, but it's mostly directed to migrants. So if they can, you know, if they can kick you out of the country and or fine you or see drugs, if they plant drugs on you, or they catch you with, you know, drugs for your own consumption, you're gonna get fined, you're gonna go to prison, but you're not gonna get executed, which is like what happens in the USA. It's like they execute you in place.
It's incomparable.
Yeah.
And I hate this. Like, I'm watching teenagers. I'm watching kids. I'm watching some of the most like frustrated, marginalized people that they know that if they go out there, they might get shot. They know if they go out there with this protest, they'll get arrested. They'll die. I know trans people of color that are going out there and throwing bricks and bottles at cops. They know if they get arrested, they will end up in a jail cell with a bunch of dudes, and they will probably get abused, or they will probably get killed.
Yeah.
They are throwing every single thing they have on the line because they know that nothing else matters at this point. And when Europeans go, wow, I'm really surprised Americans are starting to rise up, that comment frustrates me. We live in one of the most authoritarian fascist police states in the world. We can't just do a revolution. Like when people say, why aren't Americans doing things like they are in France or Ukraine? We can't do that.
It's different.
We don't have the capability to just do this, because the minute anyone even remotely stands outside, we are met with force that's undeterminate. Like even the Tiananmen Square protests weren't initially met with force. It took days for the PLA to respond. Days, weeks. And that person that stood in front of that tank wasn't even ran over with that tank.
Yeah. In the US, they
In
would
the
be
United
run
States,
over.
they're running over people with fucking police cars.
Yep.
I can't shout, like I cannot shout this enough. Like, I don't want this little revolution or whatever you want to call it that's happening in the United States. I don't want it to be infantilized by people around the world. I want fucking solidarity. You guys should be happy. You shouldn't be infantilizing the United States. You should be cheering the fact that the most powerful fascist country in the world is attempting to fix itself, even if it's not the most effective thing. Like, even if it doesn't, like, even if this starts to burn out, it doesn't matter. Like, we have a momentum. Like, I saw protests in solidarity in the Netherlands and in Great Britain and Spain and Ireland. I saw all kinds of people around the world, just like everyone's watching. You know, there's a Twitter post that went viral of a bunch of National Guard troops and Minneapolis state police officers. There were people in a neighborhood just standing outside their home watching militarized, people walk through their neighborhood, and they're on a bullhorn and they're telling everyone to stay in their houses. They're just watching. They're standing on their porch on their own, in air quotes, private property, and they were shot at by a paintball gun. They're paint markers essentially, and they just shot at these people. Even if it's non-lethal, if you hit somebody in the eye, or if you hit somebody when their heart's beating at a certain time, you could incapacitate somebody. Yeah. Or what if they have a pre-existing condition, and being shot by a non-lethal round puts them under stress, and they end up, having problems down the road. The fact that they always will resort to force. This is a thing that happens almost every single time. But and these people that were standing outside this door in this Minneapolis neighborhood, they were white. If they were black, they would not even. They'd probably burn the neighborhood. These people don't care. And I think that's the most frustrating part about having this conversation is a lot of people outside of America tend to think we don't care. Most of us, we do care. We just can't do anything about it because we know we're going to be met with some of the worst force in the world. We see what our own troops do overseas, right? The American military overseas, because they do horrendous things because they have no one to hold them accountable. We have a military that just goes to foreign countries without declarations of war, without any sort of reciprocity from the rest of the world, because America has an economic hold on everybody else, and they just get to bomb countries for free.
Yeah, they're fueled by decades of propaganda, and they're justified themselves to whatever brutality they want to afford to have, because they have like a free bar for violence. But it's true that there are many abuses that happen in Europe, but it's not so huge as it happens here. But I remember in the Spanish border there were people killed with rubber bullets trying to cross the border. We're trying to, the pateras, those little boats that cross the Mediterranean Ocean, and the police were waiting with rubber bullets, and people who were drowning, who were trying to swim to the shore, they were shooting at them with the rubber bullets and killing them, basically. So there are examples of police brutality all over the world. The thing is, it's not so as systemic and as big and as brutal as it is in the United States. Let's say that what they're experimenting in the United States, it gets exported to the rest of the world afterwards. If you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
But yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. No, people and that's the thing is, I always try and let everyone know that this is a really intense situation.
Yeah.
And I want people to start following it. We're running. I don't want to say like we're running a really hard fight, and I hope that no one here gives up on anything.
It's a really long fight too.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is that
this is going to take an immeasurable amount of time.
Right. And like that's the thing that this is the seams are bursting right now. That's but I mean, I think what I really mean when I say that this is going to be a long fight is that I think Mel and I are both around the same age, give or take. We're in our 20s, and I think we are going to have many gray hairs before a revolution as such is underway. I mean, I could be very wrong. I hope to be very wrong about that.
I hope so too.
Yeah, like I think that these revolts, these rebellions are very kind of preliminary, I guess is the right word for it. They're big, they're explosive, quite literally, but they haven't really cohered around like a program of organization or ideological cohesion or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that that's absolutely necessary for a revolutionary situation, but it doesn't hurt.
I mean, you cannot have one without the other. Like you can have just revolts, and then they blow up, and then they disappear, and then things go back to quote unquote normal, which is counterproductive. But if you have a revolt and you follow up with mutual support networks, you follow up with parallel power, dual power structures, and you follow up with with the whole shebang, with a strong party, which is probably you people as Marxist Leninists would probably advocate for a strong party and the mass line and the whole shebang,
all
right?
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I love the mass line inventorism. no shit at anarchists, and this is something that this is my controversial opinion. I don't think the revolution in the United States is going to start from a top down. I think there's a lot of people that want it to be a top down. But I don't think materially that's possible. I think it has to be a bottom up, and then it has to get organized from those points.
Yep.
Going forward, it's because structurally the United States is so it's almost impossible to do a top down because there's
could I interject real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, yeah, like I don't really so much know if I agree or disagree because I think that when people say bottom up or top down, we're dealing in very abstract terms, and I think that uh, there's some it's bound up with a bunch of ideological discourse that I think is kind of out of step with the organic conditions of the American situation. So yeah, I think if you mean that if you mean by bottom up that localized to like urban centers, like I don't know what I like people. I think we need to be very specific when we're talking about what we mean by bottom up versus top down. I think that there tends to be some ideological baggage with those
Yeah.
terms
Yeah, and that's not what
that
I was getting at.
yeah, so I'm not yeah, so I think we should just be really clear about that though.
Yeah, and it's like you have this culture, this cultural tradition of the with the grassroots organizations, and then this concept of community, which is very rooted in the U.S. culture, in the people, not in the government, if you know what I mean. Like the government is getting more and more tyrannic, and then in the U.S. culture, there's like this idea that communities organize themselves. Also, you have like the example of the protest in Chile, the uprising in Chile, which was not defeated. Like it was caught in an intermission by the coronavirus outbreak. But I'm really sure as soon as Chile de-escalates the coronavirus, and it will happen, they will come back, and there will be like two fights in one in each extreme of America, the continent, one of the southern extreme and the other one more or less to the north. And there's also Bolivia, and there's also what's going on in Ecuador, for instance. So
Right. The struggle against Agnes is horrific.
yeah, it's
Like, oh my God.
yeah, it's crazy what happened there, and it is crazy how the far left are really leading the discourse right now in the opposition towards not even the MAS, the Movimiento al Socialismo, the party that from Evo Morales, but actually the people to the left of the MAS who are leading the protests and the uprisings, and everything has been like suspended by coronavirus right now because either you do that or people are killed basically by the disease. This shit has hit the fan very much. 2020 is giving us like all the hurdles to to jump on, but it is happening. It is happening all over America. So keep in touch with those peoples too, and with those uprisings, and make be absolutely sure that we, the leftists in Europe, are in full solidarity with the uprisings in both in the United States, in Chile, in Bolivia, everywhere where the people are rising. There will be solidarity from the European comrades as well. It's just some people they have their head up their asses, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just wait for them to figure it out. By the way, Melanie, I think your camera died or something.
Oh, I turned it off because I'm like eating food and I don't.
That's cool.
I'm like fucking embarrassed that I am. So.
Don't worry. What are you having?
I'm just like eating fucking McDonald's too.
Oh, Mickey D's. Ooh.
It's like fine. I don't really like. I get it like once I get it like once in a blue moon. I don't really like it anymore. It makes me feel like crap. But I was like, it's like my. Yeah, I usually just like get it every like 6 months, and
sugar, fat, and salt. Then I go running.
Then I go
later.
back to hating it. Yeah, I go back to hating it.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Tomorrow, get some fresh veggies. Treat yourself.
Culinary masochism.
Oh yeah. I feel really bad though.
Yeah, that's another of the U.S. empire's, like say, population control methods, right? Through fast food and shit. cheap food is so bad it's gonna destroy your body eventually
Mc,
over time, right?
McDonald's McDonald's is also this one of the forefronts in the U.S. of both the class struggle and the struggle for Black civil rights. Because, like, I think it was in New York. I think this is actually still ongoing, but uh, predominantly black women McDonald's workers organized for a higher minimum wage, and also it was a big flashpoint of the Me Too movement too, because they were organizing against white male bosses who were sexually assaulting them. So there's like this kind of convergence of like modern America and capitalist contradictions uh, come into the surface in the 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 McDonald's struggle, we'll call it.
Yeah. There was this book
I
I
have
never
this
got around to
struggle.
read. It was the McDonaldization of society,
Mm,
which is like, and I remember like back in the day when the Berlin Wall and shit, when it's saying, oh, they opened the first McDonald's in Moscow, and people were freaking out. It was used as a cultural spearhead as well. And it's
oh
like,
God.
yeah, I mean, if you see historically with hindsight, the level of facepalm that you get from that shit, right? It's crazy, but yeah, it's basically all fast food is sugar, fat, and salt, and the cheaper the better, and three of them are addictive substances. So it's nothing to do with
Yeah.
nutrition. It's a lot to do with addiction, and it's really
And
fucked up.
propaganda too.
Yeah,
Like, my God, like, I think this is the other thing that whenever I've had like European visitors come here, they're always just a little like taken aback by the level of advertising that is just fucking everywhere here.
yeah,
Uh, and like, I mean, and like that's to say, Europe is thoroughly capitalist, but like just the extent of cultural penetration uh, that capital has here, the extent that everyone is wearing clothing that has, brand names on it. And there's advertisements for everything on every available piece of public domain, whatever.
yeah,
Like,
in the
just
streets and everywhere. I remember when I moved
yeah,
to Poland, I was also surprised by that. Poland is very similar to the United
oh yeah,
States in the how the advertising business has taken over all public spaces.
yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is that like people, I think, talk about propaganda in a very kind of political and abstract way, but like we are constantly, constantly subjected to propaganda in the form of advertising.
Yeah.
That is the essence of propaganda. In fact, there's one of the seminal books on the advertising industry is called Propaganda by Edward Bernays.
Hmm.
It's still read in business schools and in political science programs.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the most insidious form of propaganda and the most dominant as of today in capitalist world.
Yeah, but uh, there's a kind of a rule of thumb that I use for determining whether something is propaganda or not, which is if you say X is propaganda and somebody else says no, it's not, then it's propaganda.
what if we say it is like what we're doing right now? It's propaganda, but it's just good
Oh yeah, it
propaganda.
absolutely is.
It's good propaganda. We're trying to propagate a good
Right.
message.
Propaganda is a politically neutral term.
Yeah.
It's to say it's spreading in the most like general sense of the term. It's spreading a message with some kind of call to action.
Oh, because in English you have the word propagate, right?
Propagate, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Propagate a
the
message.
same root, the same word.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is the same in Spanish. And
I think part of the reason that the word has such a like connotation here is like a connotation of like, oh, that's authoritarian and communist and blah blah blah, is because that's how the word is presented in our school curriculums. It's like all propaganda is something that communists and fascists do. It is not presented as a politically neutral term.
yeah,
It's
because
presented as, oh, this is all about Stalin and Hitler, and only Nazis and communists use propaganda. Propaganda is inherently bad and inherently authoritarian and blah blah blah. Right, with this very, uh, of course, narrow definition of what authoritarian means, and like,
yeah, and it's because of propaganda that propaganda has this connotation actually. So it's very meta. Those fascists. What are we gonna do with them? How small pieces you can make with them? I don't know. It's a question. I leave it there.
well, they're building a wall, so just saying. Communists have other uses for walls that involve fascists.
Yeah,
Purely hypothetically, of course.
yeah. This Minecraft world where we build walls and then we use them for things. To hang a nice picture in them. to hang some people's portraits upside down. Hey Benito. Yeah, tell me about it. Oh my god. But yeah, I mean, the uprisings are a fantastic thing that is happening. Also a dangerous and muddy thing because the people who you people are facing are really violent and nasty, like the Pacos in Chile, who are awful and pieces of absolute shit. And Chile had the similar thing that we had, like in Spain. We're supposed to transition from a dictatorship to a democracy. And then nobody remembered to renew the police, the military. Nobody remembered to renew the judges, and nobody remembered to, wow. Yeah. So when you have like an openly fascistic state like the United States of America, dismantling is very difficult because it's very large. Also, it's very violent, and the amount of propaganda, of capitalist propaganda that you people need to undo, or we need to undo, because you have me on board in dismantling propaganda, all the way. Dismantling capitalist propaganda. I mean, decades and decades of Hollywood normalizing that shit. That's going to be tough to unravel, but we can do it together. Just, yeah, it may take time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that happen is everything will take time. I think the hardest part about time is the dictation of what the action should be. And I've been saying this, and I'll say this again and again and again. It doesn't matter where political tendency lies. It doesn't matter like who's marginalized the worst or the most. What matters right now is if we don't organize in any sort of semblance, or if we don't have basically we don't have our fucking shit together, nothing is going to happen after these weeks.
Yeah.
And and I don't think people want to go back to normal. And I don't think people I think a lot of people, I've noticed this even too. I have a lot of liberal friends. I have a lot of friends that are neolibs, like soc dems, like your quasi white progressive, and a lot of them are seeing what's happening in the United States, and they're kind of changing their tune. I don't know if they're not jumping to become as radical as maybe me or Melody, but they're sort of reaching consciousness, and I think that's the interesting thing about it is these are experiences that I think if you are marginalized, you see it every day. So to you, it's just a contingency of survival. And so having a community, having places to go, having people of a similar idea is just what you do to survive. It's not necessarily something you do because you have to do it, because those structures are constantly affecting you. It's kind of like, it's like Stonewall was just a building that a bunch of brown trans people hung out in because they were ostracized socially and culturally from the rest of like the United, like the rest of like the queer movement. So a lot of the time is we see communities of color picking places to live or places to be because they don't have any other place. It's like the really disparaged black neighborhoods. Those people don't leave those neighborhoods not because they're poor, but because that's the only community they have. It's very rare. You're not going to meet a black family that's going to want to go move to a white suburb. It's just not going to happen. There's a different form of community. There's a different form of culture.
Yeah, and the
And
amount of shit that you would get, you know, being black,
yeah,
moving to a white
yeah,
suburb.
yeah. And
and
so
like safety,
yeah, and
even among like, even if you're in a like, if you're in a white suburb, then like, there's like, you could, you could luck out and you'll have all your neighbors are tolerant and accepting people, but you know uh for every quote unquote good non-racist white person, there is always that one neighbor who's not too friendly to non-whites, right? And that's like, that's under the best of circumstances, right? Like, odds are this, white suburbia, one of the reasons it's so, kind of like it's so fucked is that like it is segregated both in the sense that like not very many non-white people live in it, hence being called white suburbia, but like also it's physically isolated from violence and struggle and strife, because of both color and class.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that shocked me the most as a European. You know, to go to when I the first time that I traveled to the United States and I was visiting, and one of the things that shocked me the most is this compartmentalization of the, you know, how the living, how the neighborhoods are organized. So they
Yeah,
have
it's
like a very,
100%,
yeah, very, you know,
100% a segregated society still.
yeah. And
Only segregation only.
I don't think that's by
Sorry,
chance.
yeah.
It's by design.
No, of course, yeah. Segregation in the like legalistic sense really only ever ended on paper, you know.
Yeah, and that I mean ended on paper like on the big bills, I guess, because then there's like redlining and whatnot, right?
Yeah, yeah, and like by on paper, I mean, the government signed some laws that say, don't do discrimination anymore, or or
Or
else
else.
we'll we'll, we'll do something. We'll
Yeah, that was a good one. I don't know this.
we'll totally punish you for that. Yeah, you'll have to pay a fine or something.
Were there
Oh,
attempts to undo this on behalf of the
oh, there's
people,
still there's still attempts to undo it all the time. That's what there's racist think tanks trying to undermine this kind of shit all the time, and it's like you see that this, I'd say, like probably one of the forefronts of this neo-segregationism is in the form of the privatization of schools. Like all the privatization stuff is a discourse around like privatizing roads or schools or hospitals or whatever. Like all of those questions are especially in the United States, are deeply racialized questions, and like economic. I think like this is something that if you've ever uh, heard that famous quote from Lee Atwater, the Nixon strategist, about you start off by saying N word, N word, N word, but at some point that that backfires, that hurts you. And he's talking about this in the I think during the Nixon years, so late 60s, early 70s. He says, now you can't say N word, N word, N word anymore. You have to say states' rights or forced busing
Yeah,
or, kind of
the war on drugs,
coded
right?
language. And then he says, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But like he says that, you know, at the highest level, you're talking about incredibly abstract things like raising marginal tax rates or something that don't
Yeah,
sound like they're racial at all.
yeah,
And he says that like that and this is coming from the mouth of someone who is weaponizing racism as a political economic strategy.
yeah,
This is still going on, even though he's talking about it in a very specific situation. You still find in the modern American political economy, this is still how the discourse is constructed around things like school privatization and whatnot. It's like, oh, we want to, you know, privatize schools because it will increase the quality of education or something. Like that's kind of like the rhetorical, um, whatever you want to call it, structure that you'll see framing those arguments. But it is 100% about uh, racializing economic differences.
yeah, yeah. Because when you're poor, you have less resources to defend yourself against the state. So you can weaponize the state with a racial intent.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Go for it.
I don't know if anyone. So apparently, Politico, which is a pretty good source, apparently heard and acquired documents that the Justice Department is asking Congress to basically start detaining people indefinitely without trial, and to initiate that under emergency powers.
Shit. Here comes the martial law.
I'll see if I can.
It might not make it through the House, but apparently they're starting the process.
This is on Politico's front page. What's the article called?
It's
I'm
called
looking for it.
it's called coronavirus. DOJ seeks new emergency powers amid coronavirus pandemic. I can actually
Okay.
link it to I can link it to the disc.
Yeah, okay, I'll see it.
Renee, is that the article that my friend Renee in the chat is probably was mentioning leaving a gift, a comment on one of those articles? Was that the one? Maybe, I don't know. That's a question.
I'm not sure.
Open question. That would be martial law all the way.
I mean, we're already experiencing quasi martial law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like it's not official yet, and that's the scary part. Is I've been telling people, I've been saying this and saying this and saying this. We're going through martial law, but it's not like official. And and once it becomes state word, that's going to change how everything starts going.
Right.
So
the other thing that's really scary about this is the kind of all but official deputization of far-right militias to terrorize these protests. And fucking Trump's tweeting today that he says the United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. That is some scary, fucked up shit.
Yeah, but what is Antifa? It's not even an organization.
Right.
No, it's not.
I mean,
it's literally
that's why it's scary. It's because it's a fucking carte blanche license for political repression.
Yeah.
And the Patriot Act, and there's so many, not just the Patriot Act, there's so many fucking provisions in the American law that aren't like specifically in constitutional law, like things like the Espionage Act, the Patriot Act I already mentioned. There's the Sedition Act. There's all these other things that can be used for basically, if you declare a state of emergency or you're at war or whatever. Things like indefinite detention are a lot easier for the state to get away with.
And
yeah, that's terrifying. That's really terrifying. This You know, and if it reaches that level, there has to be a way, you know, to get international support to stop those things. You know, to
Somebody
gather.
get President Xi on the line. I no, actually, no, I really shouldn't joke about that. That's bad.
You know, remember that comic book Judge Dredd, right?
I love Judge Dredd as a comic book.
It was supposed to be a parody,
But we're living it.
not
you
a
know?
prophecy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like we're living in this shit, and it's like it's weird. Like the people. Okay, this is like the juxtaposition of fucking the United States. It's like we have a bunch of people in America that are like they're reading, like they're taking the symbol of the Punisher and they're putting Blue Lives Matter flags over it, and
Yeah.
we're literally living in the reality of Judge Dredd. It's a fucking like it's a dystopian parody. It's this entire timeline is just like an utter fucking joke, and it's like,
Yeah.
but it's real. This is a real thing that's happened. There are so many days where I get up in the morning and I'm like, Donald Trump is the president and they're shooting live ammunition at protesters. Like, what is happening? It's like a fever dream. It's a fucking fever dream.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bad nightmare.
Right. But like I think what we also need to be very alert to is that, and Mel, you brought this up earlier, which is that this is not new for the United States. This is foundational to it.
I can pick any decade in the United States. I can pick any year, almost any year, and the same shit has been happening. It's never stopped, and I think that's the hardest part about it is like, and the reason why a lot of people don't know what's happening is because we've never had the ability to report these things en masse like we do now, like Twitter and Snapchat, Facebook, you know, like all the social media things. But at the same time, it creates this sort of web of the same people that are using social media are the people that are against us using social media. So it's always going to be a optic narrative fight, and we have to learn how to do things differently so it always looks like we are the ones, you know, not really doing the things, TM, you know. And I think that's, I don't think anyone ever really imagined revolutionary action with this kind of tech presence or with this kind of just how generationally we are tied to a lot of these systems. So like America right now is just in a very unique situation. And I would argue that this is the best time is to organize, and this is the best time to start figuring things out, what works and what doesn't work. Because going forward, it's going to be a slugfest. Like we're literally going against like one of the most powerful military, state, and police apparatuses in the world, and it's not going to be like, you can't compare this to. It's hard to compare this to other revolutions. Like this isn't 1920s Russia. This isn't 40s China. This isn't even 1773.
Context matters.
It's a completely different animal with completely different actors, belligerents, and people.
And you people know it better than anyone. And, you know, just say the word and you'll have our support, you know, all the way. You already have it like by heart, but if we need to set up international brigades like they used to do in the Spanish Civil War, just let us know.
And I do think that's something that will, and that is something that I obviously like cannot advocate for, but
I mean, not on YouTube.
Yeah, that is like the idea of internationalism and solidarity is probably like more important at this point. And I feel like people on both sides of the Atlantic have kind of failed that. I do think a lot of Americans don't truly understand the work that groups in Spain and Germany and other countries in Europe have put into. And I think a lot of Europeans don't think Americans are spineless and don't think they care.
Yeah.
I think both sides are very much like, they look at examples of their own struggle and they don't think, oh, well, this can't happen here. Like we often forget about the material conditions of our situations when things get personal. Definitely. So I do know that there are a lot of Americans that are like very, very defensive about how they're being treated by the rest of the world, because to a lot of, and I would say the people that are most defensive are not white folks or not like cishet white folks. Most of the people that I think that are very defensive about how the situation is being treated, you know, are Black and brown people and like queer, you know, people of color like myself. I think that's like the reason why I try and yell so hard is because, you know, I am a trans person of color. If I go out and start throwing bricks or do anything that's bad and I get arrested, I am fucked. There's nothing for me at that door. So it requires people of every class level to realize that this solidarity is important. And I do believe that like understanding the intersectionality and quote unquote, you know, liberal id pole of the situation is imperative. But there are just some people that cannot do this because if they do, the circumstances for them are way worse. And I think a lot of white folks in America and even like people that were under these conditions in Europe at various generations need to realize that like this ultimately is a class issue at heart, um, to an extensive degree. And I think it rings true more to the Midwest. So something that I don't think a lot of people understand is like there's a big difference between the riots in like the South and in like New York City, for example.
Yeah.
So like New York City and the South are incredibly diverse places. Yes, there is racism. Yes, there is segregation, but it's different. It's a completely different flavor. So like a town that I lived in the United States, um, we literally have parts of town where all of the ethnic minority groups, like we have actual social, cultural, racial, and class enclaves. So if you're black, this is the neighborhood you live in. That's it. No one goes there. The white folks that live there either only go there because there's a business, they have family, or there's like a private institution. There's a lot of private schools in my state that are surrounded by brown and black neighborhoods because they're downtown. They're like in the places like where all the white folks moved out and ran to the suburbs during white flight. So like kids go to these prestigious private universities surrounded in a gentrified neighborhood, surrounded by a, you know, like what we call the hood or whatever, what people call it here, colloquially. And like that experience can either help you understand what your privilege is, or it can reinforce your hatred or classist attitudes towards those people. And the Midwest is heavily segregated, almost to a point to where like, see, like when I would go to like Philadelphia or go to like other bigger cities on the coast, you can drive through a black neighborhood and drive through absolute poverty and then drive to like a richer black part of town where there's actual money and the people interact with each other. You know, it might not, and that's more of a class distinction. But in the Midwest, like it's not even just class, it's also race. Like these people are like like I was raised in a white suburb. So like I was taught from an early age, you don't go to that part of town. You are told as a child, this is the bad part of town. These are where the undesirables live. This is the place you don't want to go. You are taught by birth that this is just another place, and your parents will never tell you that that's where black people live. They'll just tell you that it's bad. So you're instilled, like as a kid, to know that this is a bad place to be, and then until someone tells you about it, until you're told information, or until you have that sort of cognitive dissonance with yourself, you sort of impede yourself in that racism. Like culturally, racism in the South and on the East Coast is still institutional and still taught by parents, but it's just a different way of how it's framed. But where I grow up, it's virulently framed as these people are the worst. And I think that's why it's so hard to get solidarity for working class folks, because it's even still treated among lower class whites. So like the lower class whites that live in the poorer parts of town or live out in the country, they're virulently hated by the city folk. So if you live in a downtown bourgeois urban center as a white liberal, you're going to think everyone outside of your urban sprawl is just a redneck Trump supporter. And to help those people understand that is almost impossible. But then you also have these liberals that virulently hate these Trump supporting rednecks that they call them, but then they quasi support the black folks that live in the urban centers that are getting like discriminated to. But you can't get them to have that solidarity with those people out in the country, as you can't get white suburbanites to have solidarity with black folks, but they have solidarity with the suburbanite with the working class out in the fields.
And I just wanted to add real quick to that is that I think there's also kind of, especially among kind of like urbanite liberals, there's this kind of tendency to think of rural America as exclusively white and right wing, which is just not true at all. Like there are, like I'll give you the example of the town of Woodburn, Oregon, which is like majority, I think, Mexican American. It's like an intergenerational community there, and like it is what it is an American small town, um, and I think there's just kind of this caricature. It's a very classist caricature that's you run into in urban centers a lot, even I'd say among people across racial and class lines. It's something that's true of just kind of discourse in if you live in an urban environment. But like, yeah, the rural America, small town America, whatever, despite kind of the caricatures, is definitely not all white, and it's certainly not all conservative right wing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of diversity, and there should be. And it's weird to say it in these times, when the uprising is already ongoing. But for the longer game, can't we make on purpose design for each community, for each locality, specific outreach type of programs to connect those communities and say, hey, we're not so bad, they're not so bad, everybody's not so bad. Let's get together. Let's build communities
Yeah,
in between those
I
borders.
I just wanted to use that to jump off and say there is something like that. It's called the Rural Organizing Project,
Yes.
and they are fantastic. They are fantastic folks. I know a couple in the who do work in Oregon. They are just rock solid comrades. They're doing great work.
And one thing that we need to keep in mind in this is these uprisings. They're led by Black people. And we need to follow, their lead and support them with all our
100%.
strength. And in this case, in this very specific case, and I cannot even start, to express how deep my solidarity is for these people, how deep I feel for these people who have been dehumanized for decades, for hundreds of years, since they were brought, since their ancestors were, kidnapped in the coasts of West Africa. And I don't know, what can I say? I'm lost of words. But these people, they are the leaders of this uprising, and we need to just follow, listen, and continue and try to offer the best we can offer. I don't know if I'm expressing myself correctly, because this is a very abstract feeling, but I know it to be true, at least from yours truly. But yeah, people, non-white people in the United States are the ones who are going to lead the revolution, as many have predicted before. And it's a very violent state, so there should be.
And that's the thing and that's the other thing I want to echo is like, there seems to be like, there seems to be a lot of like, I don't know if this is a word or like a phrase, but there seems to be like a lot of just like white tourism, and when riots and looting happens. Um, there's a lot of like really privileged people that are taking this as an opportunity to like participate in something, and then not really understanding like what this is supposedly about, like why this anger is here. Um,
There was that famous picture of this white guy stealing a box of Lego in the middle of the riot, right?
yeah, and it's hard because like it's hard to disseminate who is your friend and who is not, because like I have a lot of, to be honest, I like, the place that I live in now is 90% white, so so like I have a lot of white liberal friends that are, to be honest, going out, a lot of white liberal cis straight friends that are going out and trying their best, and they actually genuinely care about the situation at hand. They actually like want to change things, and they want things to get better. Like, they genuinely believe in this. They're not LARPing. They're not doing it for attention. They care, and then you have the media who is spinning anyone that is not part of the out group as outside agitators,
Yeah.
And then you have people that are doing riot tourism. They are just going in and breaking things because they're feeling the high of the moment. You know, they see the chaos and they're like, I want to be a part of this because I want to live history. And I think and like we are kind of in a generational gap where we are living history. Um, me and Melanie are the age where we've lived through a lot of quote unquote like historical moments. Like I was 9, 10, 11, like I was a young kid when 9/11 happened. You know, I don't remember like I just remember like I was in school. I was in elementary school. 9/11 happened and everything changed.
Remember when I mentioned you the fall of the Berlin Wall? I'm 45-year-old.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, dude! And, I remember like when the financial crash happened in 2008. Like I just like we're living all of these like ridiculous historical moments, and it just feels like it's the same thing. It's like a weird sort of burnout to where like what is the next? Like we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're also in the middle of like a quasi tiny revolution that's slowly brewing in the United States. Like it's like the history books are going to be really fucking interesting, and and you know who's writing it is going to be an even more interesting story. Like the wave of activism that I've seen over the last I used to think Occupy Wall Street, like I mean I make fun of it a lot jokingly, but like there was a lot of interesting perspectives to compare from Occupy all the way to now. And it's weird because I've talked to people that were activists and they said they have not seen anything like what has happened this week. And I think that's a really powerful thing, is despite all of the efforts that have happened over the last 60 years in terms of protesting civil rights, like officially, in quotes, nothing has ever gotten to this point.
Yeah.
And I think there's a measurable momentum that can be pushed. And I think a lot of people are realizing that like if we don't, I guess, do something now, you know, what else can we do? And I think, you know, as awful as Corona is, it was kind of like Corona exposed a lot of problems with the state apparatus in America, and I think a lot of people took advantage of that.
Oh,
you know?
and with capitalism worldwide,
Mm-hmm.
Corona has exposed a lot of flaws of the capitalist system, of the private, you know, models and privatization.
I would argue that like Corona helped radicalize people. Like when people were watching the rates in which people were dying in the United States, how healthcare workers were like telling people, stop going outside, you're killing people. How this disease, we don't know anything about it. It acts completely different than any other COVID strain. It acts completely different than any other respiratory illness. It acts completely different than anything we have right now. Don't fuck with it. Like, don't go outside.
Yep, definitely. And, you know, on that line, well, I have one note to go back to something that we were talking about. Don't worry about it. And it was like, yeah, why a lot of white people are participating on this protest, as it should be, conscientious, good white people. And I was thinking, you know, why don't we, like strategically, why don't we reverse the strategy of the U.S. Army during all of the 20th century and use the white people as human shields against the police? You know? Because the police aren't...
That's happening in some areas.
Yeah, I think it's strategically savvy.
It's been coordinated.
Yeah.
It's incredibly savvy.
Yeah, because, you know, police people would think twice to hit them because of their racist bias. And in the same time, you know, they provide the protest with a lot of efficacy. And that's an idea. I'll throw it out there. I hope people... I'll tweet it later. Sorry. And on the other hand, yeah, coronavirus has exposed the major flaws of neoliberalism, of this magic hand of the market, this bullshit dogma that was always a dogma that never had a scientific base whatsoever. And right now, it's a historical moment for us in the left worldwide to say, fuck this capitalist shit, let's do proper socialism. Let's do it as democratic as possible, and not democratic as in voting every 4 years, but as people taking part of the choices that need to be made. People really participating on policy, participating on their communities, and leave the cell phone and the laptop away and start organizing with the people in your neighborhood to make your neighborhood a better place, and therefore your city, and therefore or your town, and therefore your state, and therefore your country, and therefore the world, from the ground up, like we said before, in this abstract, but in this very concrete, example. I don't know what you think about that. Sorry about that tirade.
No, you're okay. I think that's why this is like such a difficult conversation to have, like with like actual like how do we navigate this? Because there's so many things to talk about. There's so many things to touch on, like whether you want to approach this like theoretically or whether you want to approach this like through like cultural like hegemony. Like I mean, there's so many things to dissect from it, and I think having conversations like these going forward are going to be like crucially important. I don't want to throw anyone like I want people to be doing direct action and I want people to be like still doing live streams and talking about the application of theory and how we can turn the chaos into something more directed, and realizing that not everyone can run out and throw bricks. Not everyone is built for that or can. We have to create a solid network of people that are willing. We have to provide resources. I think this is the most pivotal time to provide resources.
Yeah.
If you know someone that doesn't know how to protest or doesn't know what direct action is, give them resources. If you don't know how to even like use a basic application like Telegram or whatever you're using to talk to each other, or Discord, whatever, just any way to keep in contact with people that you're worried that might be affected by corona, you have to teach people how to use things. I think a lot of people, we've essentially have created hundreds of thousands, if not maybe a few million radical people in this country. Good. And if we don't capitalize on these people and keep them going, it's going to burn out.
Yeah.
And so I think people need to have a lot more patience. I think a lot of people are now is not the time to gatekeep people. Now is not the time to get angry if someone doesn't do something perfect. Now is the time to course correct and keep everyone on the same message. If someone makes a mistake, tell them, hey, we can't do this. This is what we're supposed to do or what we should do, and go forward. I think we have spent, and this is my criticism of like a lot of people, we have spent an incredible amount of time in America arguing and criticizing people about the burning or bust, about voting, about protesting, all of these things. We spent months doing this. Now that we have an actual like material movement going, it's a waste of time to gatekeep people. It's a waste of time to tell you, oh, you're not doing this right, or your opinion is wrong. At this point, everyone kind of like the writing is on the wall. Like there are police officers shooting at unarmed civilians with live and non-live rounds. At this point, if you haven't been radicalized, you're either A, living under a rock, or you're incredibly indoctrinated with the culture.
Or frankly, you're the enemy.
Or you're with the fascists. So at this point, it does not matter.
Pick a fucking side.
It's about picking side. It really is. Like and this is the thing that I say all the time. Like, you know what? I'm gonna be honest. I have a lot of fucking issues with anarchists. I have a lot of issues with non-bi POCs leading revolutions, especially in certain parts of the country. I have a lot of issues with those things, but I'm willing to throw those things aside for just one momentary second, because I know that at the end of the day, like, we all need this. This is not just about me anymore. This is about literally everyone. And if anyone who is outside of America, if you have friends, talk to them about the situation in America. Talk to them about class distinctions and how you have more in common. Talk to your friends and don't, this is, if the rest of the world starts shaming America for cops, it's going to make America look even worse than it is. Like, imagine, like, every modern industrialized nation shaming America's cop presence. And this is embarrassing. Even fascists like Erdogan and Duterte and etc. are even shaming America. Like, what? Like, this is kind of, we are living in a hellhole. Like, when people that are authoritarian assholes are even going, man, what's happening over there? Like, we're reaching pivotal points, and if
Yeah,
we don't capitalize on any of it,
I can confirm on that. Like from here, what you see of the United States is this: its prestige falling, rapidly. It has like nobody has respect for the United States as a nation right now. They just have a big military, but as a culture, they're fucked. They can give only clones of the Avengers movies, and that's about it. And like the establishment, United States, I have all the faith in the world in the people that live in the United States. I always said like the United States are a lot of really good people that have to put up with a shitty system. But right now, the United States as a nation is its prestige is never been so low. It's never been so low internationally. It's a shithole. Like what the Donald Trump said, like shithole countries.
We live in a developing world. I look at like countries like China, who like we call like Americans like have this characterization that all these other brown folks are these dirty, uncivilized people. There's Americans that are flushing like paper towels down the toilet and flooding septic systems. There are people that don't even know how basic plumbing works, and they're like destroying infrastructure. And yet we condemn all these other countries for not being as modern and industrialized as the United States, and yet we can barely yet our citizens barely understand basic like, I don't know, infrastructure systems. It's like appalling. I can't, like, we live in a developed world. They're like, the only reason why there are parts of this country that are nice is because the rich has all the money. So all the money goes into those nice parts of town. Other than that, they don't care.
Yeah.
Nobody here cares.
These indicators they use to measure how rich a country is. It's like they pick their richest and they pick their poorest and they make the average, and that's good enough. But when you have people like Jeff Bezos and the egghead piece of shit, and or the Elon Musk, the smoke selling piece of shit, and they're super rich and they're loaded, and that's the image that they want to project. But the fact of the matter is, like, you have people working 2 or 3 jobs to just barely make it.
And Jeff Bezos is on his way to be the world's first trillionaire.
Yeah.
$1 trillion is a million. It's
an abysmal amount of money.
It's like whoever this person said, I've been saying it every day. The U.S. is a failed fucking state. It's kind of amazing that we've kept this facade for over 250 years. Like, if there's anything I kind of have a semblance of respect, is I'm kind of impressed that we've kept this going for so long.
It's nothing shy of impressive that it's managed to not collapse in on itself.
Like that's the only compliment I will ever give this nation, is that holy fuck, it survived for like longer than like even like it baffles like every like economic and like theoretical like like inquiry. Like there's no way it should exist, but oh boy, it's just America having a normal one.
Yeah, basically, it's the United States is falling apart right in front of our eyes in a historical speed, but still very fast for historical speed. But it's really falling apart. It's done. I mean, we should really look away and move on, internationally but right now it's how to take care of that magnificent people that live there. How to organize these wonderful people into having a better life than what we have now. And, like setting the example of Vietnam, who were quote unquote bombed to the Stone Age, and they managed to thrive with their problems and their, but they managed to get out of there. You will also get out of there, good people. Just down with the system as the way it is, and let's build something new, something better. And as I always say, it's a very complicated matter. It's a difficult task, but it's a lot of us too. It's like not everybody's gonna be like the Antifa super soldier. There'll be some friend, who or comrade who is like all jacked and has all the muscles, but there'll be some other friend who is very good at being a teacher. So go teach away. There's got to be a friend who's gonna be like a good cook, fantastic cook. So go to the food bank and make those delights for those homeless people. And there's gonna be another friend who's gonna be very good at math and distribution, and they're gonna take the accounts of the commune and make them happen, efficiently, so not a cent is lost and everything is distributed good. There's gonna be good.
Right.
There's gonna be philosophers, all kinds of people.
I'm watching cops destroy mutual aid stations.
Yeah.
Like at protests, like
Yeah.
they're destroying water bottles, and
Yeah.
these are people that have peacefully protested. These people don't have weapons, they don't have guns. They're literally throwing away water.
Yeah.
Like these people do not want this to happen. Like they are fucking scared.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that everyone needs to understand is these people, and like I mean, when I walked past the police checkpoint at the protests that I went to, the police are just making jokes. They think this shit is funny. They literally none of these people care. They are so far removed from the class. They are so far removed like culturally. They're so far removed economically. Like they just don't. They have no semblance of solidarity with the working class. They have no solidarity with like the community, the people that they are supposed to serve. There was nothing there. There's nothing there for them. And so to them, this is a normal day at the office. Having that power dynamic that they so have because they are the state, they get to exercise this whenever they want. Two things that I've actually I need to confirm. One of them is a lot of police officers, and this has been reported from a lot of people, but a lot of police officers, like when they get fired or when they get cut from a department, they'll just move to another precinct. They'll just go to another town and they'll just continue the same shit. There's actually almost like zero accountability that actually happens. I mean, unless someone is like blackballed or blacklisted from anything, they're just going to keep doing the same thing. It's a cycle. It's also the same thing with law enforcement recruitment. They pick certain towns to recruit people in. A lot of police officers, especially a lot of the white ones, they live in suburbs. They actually drive to the inner city to go to work. So to them,
yeah, I was going to say most cops in Portland actually live in Vancouver, which is the city to our north.
Wait, in Canada?
No. In Portland, there's a city called Vancouver, Washington, which is across the Columbia River, across the Washington state border.
Oh my God. Yeah, like this is another thing that's insanely common is like a lot of cops, they don't live in the cities that they enforce. They're not in the community. Like the word community policing is like an oxymoron at this point. It doesn't exist. It's just a joke. It's like literally a joke word at this point.
It happens a lot with police, like mostly with riot police, because it's not the same beat cop than riot police. But riot police, they do that a lot. They take them from outside of the city, so they're separated. They don't see them as their neighbors. They're not recognized. They're subtracted from that environment, so they can beat the shit out of people.
It's also easier to be a riot police cop and be outside your city because you're not responsible. You're just there to do your job and then you leave.
And in Spain, they do it in a way that they bring them from other provinces, but mostly from rural places. So they're very, the rural Spain is absolutely disconnected from it. It's a separate reality. Like the same political parties that operate at a national level, they can mean absolutely different things in rural Spain. Like there's this little town and this mayor is from the right-wing party and they get voted, but they apply, more or less social democratic policies at a city level, like a town level. And they don't care. It's just a freaking brand, and it's the neighbor and he's accountable to the other people. So when people who are trained police and they come from those realities and go to a city to a big riot, riot police gear, to a big demonstration, they just there to do their job. They don't know any of these people, and for them these people are crazy and absolutely alien because they don't know jack shit about them. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's
Yeah, no, that seems right on. I just
Don't worry. You were muted, right?
Yeah, I was. I tend to just mute myself when I'm not talking because otherwise I make all kinds of little nervous noise and
Why do you make
I
nervous noise?
tap my fingers on the computer and make a bunch of noise and
Why
stuff.
are you such a nervous? Why are you such a nervous Andy?
Oh,
It's
I don't know.
reasonable.
No, it's no. I'm not trying to get at her for being reasonable. I don't know. I've been so fucking to be honest, like I've been so fucking on edge lately. Like I feel like I've
No,
just
me
been
too.
I feel like I've just been yelling at everyone because I'm just so
Vent,
I'm just
sister. It's understandable, and you're with
I'm
friends anyway.
I know I'm so angry. Like this is like, and this is the thing that sucks. Like I don't know. Like when you're a person of color in America, like this every fucking thing is life. Like this is fucking life or death for us. Like and like I have a relatively decent amount of privilege because like I'm Korean, but that doesn't take away from the fact that like I'm still trans. So like even if I got arrested, I would still be treated like every other trans person of color as it. The likelihood of me getting murdered is significantly low compared to black trans women, but it doesn't obfuscate from the fact that if you're queer and a person of color, you're going to die. If you're black and a person of color, you're going to die twice. Like the rate for you is even worse. And that's something that can't be said enough. There were a couple black trans people that were murdered, and I don't know if it was during the protests or after or like about a couple days before. And so they're getting signal boosted all over like Twitter as well. So this is a thing that doesn't just affect like the cis community, but affects the trans community, affects the queer community. Like a lot of times, like people that like with my opinion or like my viewpoint or material conditions are never really heard about, are never really talked about. And so it's
I mean,
it just
who would have said that it was that the politics were intersectional, right?
Yeah, this is like what this kind of moment is what makes me want to just like absolutely scream about the so-called dirtbag left because these are people who are now like giving credence to the oh the protests are actually bad narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like that. Protests are necessary. They're ugly. They always get ugly. They always get ugly because of the freaking police and their violence. And but protests are really necessary because that's the only way to hear of the unheard, the people who are not listened to because they don't have a way in the system to be listened to.
I spent months on neoliberal panels. I spent months on like left, like what is called left Twitch. I spent months like telling everyone this. I spent months saying that this is something you can't fucking ignore. And like every single time I brought up intersectionality, especially about the police or especially about like the whole like you're a trans person of color, I was always told, well, you're just optically explaining it bad. It was like, what do you mean I'm optically explaining it bad? Like, this is something that's going to fucking affect us and it's going to happen. And so many of those fucking people that I was talking to are eating their words. Like, we all told them what was going to happen. We were all telling them what has been happening. And the minute it starts happening, they go, oh.
Yeah, and
who could have seen this coming?
Like
yeah,
blue check liberals are going like, oh, all of these people that we've been constantly badgering for months on the internet, I personally have badgered people that I've been telling you, you're not doing fucking enough. It's the same thing like when I tell a lot of the organizers, like, you're not doing enough, like you're not listening and like you're not reading the things that matter. And all they do is laugh at it and they call it LARPy and they call it pointless and they say, oh, you're weaponizing your fucking existence. Why am I weaponizing my existence? A black man was fucking murdered by the state.
Yeah.
And millions of people around the world heard that fucking, like, saw that fucking video and they did something about it.
And that's even the visible part. Like, try to get a job, try to borrow money from a bank, try to do regular life things, you're gonna have to go through extra hurdles. If you see your name and your name is not wide enough, it's not, your CV is
many
gonna
of
go
those-
straight to
many
the
of those
dump.
names, many of those names that are not white are rooted in African, like they're rooted in like Swahili and like prefixes that are like held to like African tribal names. And a lot of black folks that name their kids that, they're trying to reclaim a part of their culture that was forcefully taken away from them because they were given slave names like Jefferson and Washington. Slaves were basically given the names of their benefactors. They were given the names of their captors. And for the first time in their life, they get a chance to rename themselves something that they actually generally want. And then they're laughed at and told they're not good enough to get a job.
Yep.
It's the same fucking cycle. We are never allowed as culturally, as people of color, as queer folk, to have any fucking semblance of culture, any sort of fucking semblance of respect for ourselves. It always gets taken away from us almost every single time.
Yeah.
And so when people are surprised that it like this is the thing that infuriates me more than anything, but it's also the thing that makes me very, very happy. I hate the fact that almost every revolution or every revolutionary moment in the world is built on the dead bodies of brown and black people. It's always someone being killed by the state that inspires a bunch of white folks to do something about it. But at the same time, it's the only way. Seeing us murdered in the streets, seeing black people shot every day is the only way that white folks are going to fucking get it. And that's horrendous to say, but it's true. These people are not going to do this on their own. They're not going to look at Bezos and go, man, this guy's really problematic and has a lot of money, but what are they going to do about it? They're not going to hold him accountable. They're just going to write a Twitter thread about how he's a billionaire. But what does that actually do? What does that accomplish?
Remember when we were talking about walls before, right? Whoops.
I mean, like, like suburban white flight is suburban white flight is make America great again.
Yep.
Like just white people separating themselves from culture, wanting to make an enclave or like ethno-nationalism. That's make America great again. That all of these things are just intrinsic dog whistles of separation, and they happen every generation or so. It's the same. It's the same quasi segregation that existed in the 60s. It's the same quasi segregation that happened after Reconstruction. It's the same quasi. It's the same like quasi like thing that happened after like when states wanted statehood, like the Oregon Trail. It's all the same shit.
And the American dream, the get rich or die trying, and how it affected like the even black communities with the gangster Trail, culture.
People going out west were escaping the black urbanization of the North. They wanted to go live in the fucking woods somewhere in their own like racially ethnic enclave because they didn't like hanging out with a bunch of people that were different colors than them. These were the same.
That's the whole history of my state.
Yes, like that was the whole like this is the problem. Is like almost every single westward state like past the Missouri and the Mississippi were founded on the foundation of like moving a bunch of people and killing them.
Yeah.
Just because they couldn't handle things changing. Now America is running out of places to go. The suburbs are actually becoming more diverse. People are actually intermingling. Things are becoming like whiteness is actually starting to go away in some major cities. Liberals are more open to like commodification of like other culture. Things are changing, and these people are fucking scared. It's the same generation after generation of people that just don't want this to happen, and they're fighting back. And that's it. Like that's the oppression. It's not even. I mean, it's kind of really weird. The whole dynamic and dichotomy of this is just a bunch of losers that just want to live in a white society, and they can't have it. And America was never that country to begin with. America was ridiculously diverse, even when the British brought people over. Like, it was actually kind of a weird experiment. The reason why a lot of people thought of it as an experiment is that at one point, America was the most ethnically diverse colony in the world, and a lot of people forget about that. There were the empire brought in people from China and India and Africa and Trinidad and Tobago and all these other countries. Like America, like Appalachia, before it was mainly white folks, Appalachia was one of the most like diverse places in America. There were about like 1,000 Indian miners that were brought in, and like Chinese miners and like black miners as slaves that were brought in to mine Appalachia, and they lived alongside the white folks. And then when things got racist and weird, they ended up leaving. But for the most part, like a lot of parts of America and its foundational aspects were incredibly fucking diverse. Like the origin of like the like Americanized like food culture is incredibly was incredibly diverse, and that whole history has been almost erased because of slavery, because of racism. Like I think there was a lot of like there's a report is like so like what we now know is like sriracha, and what we now know is like sort of like a lot of the Asian food like that is Americanized. A lot of that stuff was like a lot of those recipes were like conceived during like the 1800s and like early 1900s, and then a lot of those records were lost just due to like the Chinese Exclusionary Act and racism and all these like there's so many stories of America being this diverse place, but it keeps the narrative is always going to be this never happened, these things never occurred, this is the way it has always been for generations. It has to be spun, it has to be a narrative spun by these people, and it's always going to be that way. This is just what this country was foundationally built on. And until people start talking about the history in an earnest, honest discussion, it's just going to be, it's never going to change. And so you're finally seeing people that it's not just people throwing bricks through windows, it's people actually like talking about history. I've seen so many threads on Twitter lately of people just saying this building that we're burning was a slave building. You didn't know that, right? You just assumed it was some historical building in the South. Well, no, this was a slave auction building, so we're burning it down, or this entire district of like fancy shops is literally on an Indian burial site. We're going to burn it down because we told you again and again and again that this is like a violation of occupied land. So it's there's a lot of really interesting things that are coming out of the situation. And I think a lot of people are finally coming to, I think the general population of like white folks is coming to a more mutual understanding, but what they do with it going forward is, it's up to them. Like I said, this is super fucking early, but this is just me being angry and dumb. Sorry.
Don't worry. As we say, like in the autonomous left in Spain, we always say, organiza tu rabia, organize your rage.
Free Catalonia.
Oh, so free Catalonia, which is like a very
hey man, Spain is also not a real country.
Don't even get me started.
Abolish it.
Don't even get me started.
Abolish the United States. Abolish the United States. Abolish the United States.
It's like abolish Spain. Like abolish all these countries that just shouldn't exist. Like Great Britain, it just shouldn't exist. Like, the Irish, like the Scots, the Welsh, they were there first. Like, just abolish all of these settler colonial states.
One step at a time, but yeah, definitely. One step at a time though. Like if we abolish Spain right away, we're gonna left out without social security or the national healthcare system. So one thing at a time. We have like public healthcare still. We're trying to protect it now. So it's what's keeping us from a bigger death toll of coronavirus, basically. And but yeah, definitely fuck those states and their oppression. It needs to be. I mean, I'm not against the existence of the state, but and all anarchists are gonna freak out right now. But it's about how the state is organized. Does the state serve the people, or does the state control the people? And that's how that's the difference. It's not about the form. It's about the purpose. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Spain, Catalonia, Galicia, Euskal Herria, don't even get me started. But the thing is, why don't we get like an Iberian Federation, even like I always advocate for a Soviet Union with Mediterranean characteristics, going all over Europe, including all the Italian peoples too, mostly southern Italian peoples who would, it would be like with the good things of the Soviet Union minus the bad things of the Slavic culture, all the brutality that the Slavics have, with a relaxed attitude, democratic and fine and Mediterranean, taking it easy and helping each other. But that's a different story. Yeah, right? Sounds good.
We're very nice people, I promise.
Yeah, well, yeah. We're all very nice people, all leftists.
I honestly, I'm like the nicest person. I think I've just been more angry because like it's hard. Like
I mean, you wouldn't be here otherwise. I, I love you
Like,
both. You're fantastic people.
I never like I try so hard. Like I never wanted to like I don't hate activism or anything. I never knew that I was gonna be going to protest. Never knew that I was gonna go on fucking stupid fucking panels with several hundred people and yell things. I never thought I was ever gonna do this any time in my life, but I just decided one day I'm done, and here I am. And so like I get frustrated because like, you know, and I like I said, I do both. Like I still do these neoliberal panels. I fucking hate it, but like I mean, I do plenty of direct stuff that I don't talk about. And I think that's the reason why is that people think that I don't actually like do anything IRL. Oh, it's because I don't talk about it. I can't. It's not what you're supposed to do. Everything we do is in Minecraft. So I just the only thing that I want people to understand at the end of the day is that we have a incredible differential point of view between lots of groups of people, and that half of us in this world are incredibly not privileged, and half of this world are incredibly privileged, and we have to find a meeting point to where it all makes sense. You know, you're always gonna have to. You're like dual power is like the most important thing. If there's something that you can do, you should do your best to do it. You
Yeah.
know, even even if it's not much, and I will never gatekeep or and I will never get upset at people if they just can't do anything, because people have disabilities, people have immunodeficiencies, people are neurodivergent. Not everyone can do everything. Not everyone can throw bricks. Not everyone can, you know, talk on the camera to fucking shit neolips.
We're circling around
Yeah.
to each according to the needs from each according to their
Yeah,
ability, right?
Yeah.
yeah, and I
Don't ever ask me on a panel to debate because I am a garbage debater. Oh my God.
Yeah, fuck debate. Debate
it's
sucks.
hard.
I'm great at presenting information. I'm great at presenting an argument. I am bad at just the like I guess what you might call like the format of debate. Like
It's
I lose my I in those kind of potentially confrontational situations, I lose my I lose my trains of thought, I lose my coherence, I lose my temper sometimes. So I am just like I keep myself away from so-called debates.
Yeah, because
it's it's tough. Like I said, it's something that like I started doing recently, and every time I think about it, I realize like it is. I'll be honest, it is probably one of the hardest things to do. If you've never done it, or if you can't do it, don't do it. Like I feel like so many people watch like Destiny, or they watch these nerds. You know, they watch these nerds and they go, "I can do this," and it's definitely not for everyone. I have such a I hate it. I vehemently hate it, but I do it because part of it, to a degree, is agitprop.
yeah,
You're gonna meet like this is a time where a lot of liberals are realizing that, you know what, we were right all along, and you have to stoke that fire. You have to figure out how to get those people at least somewhat interested in your position. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but they have to at least you gotta like you can't push the you can't push the cart before the horse. You have to somehow get people to realize that the system is even more brokener, and a lot of these people have to see it visually. And so, you know, there as of a couple hours ago, there are Humvees in Los Angeles County. Like there are full on military grade like uniformed soldiers marching in blocks down streets. And this is something that I think a lot of liberals have never had a chance to confront. I think a lot of liberals, they're so used to living in these nice parts of town, they've never have been confronted by violence in this kind of way. And so I think once you atomize the existence of violence to these people, they're more adept to want to go, okay, how do we make this violence go away? And then they start listening to the people that are upset, hopefully. And then they go, okay, what can we do for you? And then hopefully things will go forward. But I mean, like I said, it's America is not a monolith. There are so many things that are going on right now, and so
it's a very big territory, and there's a lot of different things going on at the same time.
The thing that I tweeted this a minute ago, but I'm just gonna say it again, which is peaceful protest doesn't work against military occupation. We are at fucking war.
Yep.
Yeah, like we are officially at war. Like this is the people's war. You know, and this is what I say all the time. Like this is the people. Like it doesn't, you know, this is where we are at the class intersection. And I want everyone to realize again and again that like it's all of us now. You can say, you know, we can sit here and we can talk ideology, or we can sit here and we can say, well, you're this, you're that, but like this is full on class consciousness. This is a full on class war, and everyone going forward. Oh, since this is like day 6 of the American Revolution, TM, you need to pick sides. The world needs to start picking sides. So if you want to pick the side of fascism, then you are on the side of fascism. And, you know, this is when conversations start to end. And I think a lot of people need to start drawing their lines now. You have to realize that, like, your uncle who's a cop, you're not going to turn that person. Your family member who starts posting on Facebook, you know, there are good people on both sides. You have to start abandoning people in your life or abandoning ideas that are going to be detrimental to a movement. You know, this is very much the centrists and the moderates and the independents in America. Oh baby, they got to start picking some sides. Everyone has to pick sides now.
Yeah, it sounds like a civil war, right?
You know what, and you know what, and I'm on the side of, you know, people that cannot be named. You know, as always, and you know, like. And you know, I think, you know, YouTube can YouTube dox me for my fucking Juche flag in the background?
Yay!
You know, I just like, you know, whatever. If anyone wants, you know, I just like I'm super angry, and I just want everyone to be as mad as me. And I think that's the big message of a lot of like POCs and like a lot of queer trans people of color too. Is like I think they just want everyone to realize how mad it is. It's fucking June. Like it's literally June. It's the 51st anniversary of Stonewall. So like, you know what? If you still think that it's okay to support cops in pride parades, you know, fuck you. I don't care. You still think it's okay to support like trans people to have the right to serve an imperialist military force that just goes around bombing brown people, then fuck you. Like I don't care. Like I'm reaching this point to where I can't make sacrifices for people anymore. You know, I will try my best to meet people if they're willing to, but if they're not, like that's the end of the line here. You know, I'd rather be with a community of people that care about me, be with a community of people that advocate for my existence, than try and copiously survive and side with a bunch of people that ultimately, at the end of the day, just truly don't care.
Yeah.
And like the hardest part about Pride for me personally is that, you know, Marsha P. Johnson was murdered and thrown in the Hudson River, and Sylvia Rivera died by herself taking care of elderly and like middle-aged trans women who were suffering from AIDS. And she died in a house in upstate New York, and no one knows that she even died. Like it's just no one talks about her anymore. The two people that threw the first brick and founded the entire Pride movement are dead. They died because no one gave a shit, and they died because nobody cared. And the only reason why anyone cares about all these black folks that are being murdered in the streets is because people are fucking filming it. You know, a single person who died, you know, started an entire movement, and it's something that should have happened months ago. Like Ferguson shouldn't have been the start of things. Like Eric Garner shouldn't have been the start of things. You know, like it should have always have been the start of things. So
it seems like a last straw. You know, this explosion was like a last straw on and what seems to be like a cycle. I mean, remember the South Central, the riots in California.
Oh,
right?
the riots, the LA riots. Like yeah. I remember the day that happened. Like not me personally. Like I remember like reading reports of people that said the day it happened, like they exonerated 6 police officers, and a couple of them I believe were also black. One of the officers, I think was it Freddie Gray that was in the police van? Someone,
Baltimore police?
yeah, one of the
Pretty
officers
sure.
that. Huh?
I said I'm pretty sure that was Baltimore.
Okay, one of the Baltimore police officers that was involved with Freddie Gray, like they were black as well. So like it's not even just like it's not just the fact that these it's not even just a racial element. A lot of this is class. A lot of this is people siding without their self-interest in mind, or people siding with the sides of their oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are finally starting to see that. And that's why I say like picking sides is so important. I really hate the moderate or like neoliberal approach to I have to examine all the evidence and then come to a conclusion. What conclusion do you have to come to? The state is literally murdering people. Why do you want to side with a state that murders American citizens? You supposedly want a free country. What's very free about that? You know, the fact that there are Americans that are willing to put a small business or put a business above a body is infuriating to me. It's so ridiculous that people would much rather say, "Hey, I care more about material goods. I care more about commodities than a person." You know, or then if you do talk about this person, it's always, well, he was on drugs. He was a criminal. It's constantly making excuses for one's existence and not just simply looking at the fact that this was a man who did nothing wrong and was murdered. And mostly because he was also not white. And then you have to build that collective consciousness from there, and you keep going. It's this cognitive dissonance that you have to have with other people. And until those people understand like what everyone who is non-white goes through on a daily fucking basis, it's never going to change. And like and I think the reason why a lot of us don't talk about this as often anymore is because we feel like broken records. Like, how many times do we have to say this over and over and over again? The state does not care. They don't care about us. They don't even care about you. And
But it's us as Leninists, faithful Leninists, have to patiently explain, right? So here we are.
it's
Here
hard.
we are.
It's hard to explain. Like I always every time I like argue with these people or try and tell these people like, hey, like we need to understand this is race, this is class, this is the way culture is concentrated in certain power positions in America. It's like I sound like such a broken record. I have repeated so many of these conversations on almost every single thing that I've gone on over the last like 8 months, and some people get it, some people don't. I've actually gotten a lot of people to start agreeing. It's a slow burn, and you know I appreciate everyone that puts out content. I appreciate every single theory thing you guys do. I think it's like the greatest thing ever because I'm not a theory girl. I'm terrible at fucking theory. I'd much rather like yell at people about like why things are bad and throw bricks. I'm terrible at like reading the book and like I'm terrible at reading. I can read the book fine. I'm terrible at reading the book and then after going, okay, what do I really feel about this? Actually, it's hard for me to like,
I
you know.
hear you. I
Yeah.
haven't read a
I mean,
book in
that's
years because I'm depressed, basically. I can't focus.
that's yeah, definitely my wheelhouse. I read too much,
Yeah, you're
and
so good. You're
I
actually so. That's the one thing I admire about you is you're so good at that. You're so good at like
Yes.
synthesizing it really well.
Bring it on, sister. Absolutely. That's,
I do my best.
yeah,
You
yeah.
do better than most people. It's
We're
very
grateful for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I always try to stress that, like, my orientation towards theory is not to be the cleverest person in the room. It's not to be the knower of all the things. That's not useful, right? From, to quote Lenin, without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement, right? We need our theory needs to be in service of cohering and reflecting on the active living events of struggle, right? So theory is not a Bible of revolution. It's not it's a handbook. It's a field guide, not a instruction manual, if that
Yeah.
makes
Or
sense.
like a toolbox, right?
And yeah, it's exactly it's the it's the I had a good metaphor coming on, but I lost it anyway.
Sorry.
But some theoretician I am, right? But yeah, no. They're tools for our ability to talk about the things that are happening in a common language. And I think that that's maybe kind of the the point of theory that's lost on a lot of people is that, right, like when we talk about when we're talking about theory, we're talking about language.
Yeah.
Theory is about language and sharing language in a community, within a community, for the purpose of acting externally, right? Like the philosophers have merely interpreted the world until now. The point, however, is to change it, right? That's the core of Marxist philosophy, is to, you're not just, like Descartes alone in your room thinking about uh, what is the thing in itself, and oh, what does it mean to be, it's not this abstract academic nonsense. It's how do we think so that we can act, how do we act, and then think about how we act, and so on, in kind of a reciprocal circle, dialectical, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's grounded in reality. It's observation of reality and breaking down what's going on.
Materialism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what you do, and people like you and Theory Believe, and other people who are really good at theory. It's you do all the reading, and you do all the hard part, so people like Melanie and me can understand, and can use it, to agitate and do more like propaganda, that we can
Yeah.
maybe step it down another notch for people who are not really into
Yeah.
politics.
Whenever I listen to anything like Melody says, or whenever my more theory inclined friends read something, or they reinterpret, I don't know, like when they reinterpret something, I always make sure to like not dumb it down, but to like reframe it, because a lot of people struggle with this stuff, and I don't think it's because I think it's just because theory is really, really, really it carries this sort of connotation of academia that is separate from a lot of other people, and I think it's moving the ball away from fancy words by dead by dead white Europeans to something that is applicable for everyone. And
Yeah.
it does take people that can interpret that, because someone like me, like when I read a book, I just read it at face value, and I just go, these are things that I think I would take out of it. But I'm very bad at like reading that book and like, how can I make someone else understand this, and with the same exact sort of context that the book is asking me to do. And I'm very bad at that. And you do that very well. And I hope that more people like you start coming out and like doing videos or talking and getting that information out there, because it is really hard for the average person to even stop and go, how am I going to read? Like, I mean, how do you read State and Revolution and get things out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we were trying to do on my channel the last month when we talked about it.
We can always
And
do
I
that
think,
more.
yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, no,
I,
absolutely. That's what my channel exists for.
oh,
So
I need to send something in the Discord.
yeah, so right. Like, and this is, I think, something that Mel and I have kind of common ground on as Leninists, which is that the program of political education, right? Like, to be able to articulate a political line, right, is critical to building like a movement, essentially, right? You have to be able to use consistent language to describe the problems that we're confronting in society, and to be able to, as a, in the case of like a Leninist style vanguard party, to be able to, create those, create and act on those, using those theoretical theoretical framework as your basis. So it's about more than simply just kind of knowing shit for the sake of knowing it. Like, why do you study Marx? You study Marx to understand how the economy works, because that's, the central piece of how modern society is organized is capitalism. You study Marx to understand capitalism. You don't study Marx to just show off. Basically, you study Marx so that you understand capitalism, so you have specifically a common and correct language to articulate the problems of capitalism around.
Yeah. And then and how to spread that language, those tools to, face our realities. It's kind of the hurdle that we need to bridge the gap between the one and the other. Like they are very, very good terms to analyze the thing in depth, but if you throw them out, in the out of the blue in a conversation with some rando who is not versed in the thing, then they're gonna go blank. They'll stare at you blankly, and that's a gap that we need to reach. We need to bridge that gap and make one thing lead to the other. On all the tensions between the capitalist class and the working class.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point of my channel, I guess, is to not just shove a bunch of theory down people's throats so that they can understand what reification means or whatever, but so that I want to put the tools in your toolbox.
You're a teacher.
Right?
You're a teacher.
Yes, that's what I do.
And
I am a teacher, and I'm not. I mean, that's the funny thing is, I'm not even. I'm not trained in the humanities at all. I'm a physicist.
But you're good at
it. So I think that might actually be why I have like a particular angle on teaching this stuff, is because I'm approaching it as kind of with fresh eyes myself. I'm not approaching it as somebody who like systematically studies the humanities. I'm approaching it as somebody who really like needs to build my understanding from the ground up, so that like when I try to like say break down the state and revolution, I'm doing so from kind of an organic place. I'm not trying to situate it in this very academic like intellectualized discourse. I'm just trying to say, hey, I read this book, let's figure out what it means and talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important, because I feel like just the approach of, hey, I read a book, let's figure out and talk about it. Like I think that's such a nice way to sort of, there's this air that the Marxist style book club is just like a bunch of nerds just like jerking off a book, and I think it needs to go away from that. It needs to just be like, how can we make this book teachable?
Right.
Well, I
think if you're doing study groups the right way, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part, I think, is breaking down these preconceived notions of like what Marxist Leninism is like even a tendency. I do think it's hard. Like, so I got radicalized just by being a working class person. I never read a theory book in my life until like recently. I never knew every revolutionary. I didn't know history. There's so many things I didn't know. I just started seeing the job that I work at basically made me hate everything, and I wanted to know more. Like why and which it is, like why does it exist? Why what am I
say? One could say that you were feeling alienation.
Yeah, like what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I hear you.
Like what can I do? And so I started reading, and I started like learning things from other people, and I started like my sort of tinge to radicalization. And like as someone who was very much involved within the far right for a long time, it's kind of weird to go it's weird to switch, but it's also, I think, a lot easier to switch when you don't have to contend with neoliberalism. I think it's a lot easier to switch politics. I think it's a lot harder to reach liberals in the middle than it is for people who like are more on the tense of like a radical political idea. So like even like I'd argue that like libertarians and even like some like radical trad cons they're still radicals in their own political dichotomy. But I think a lot of liberals struggle with like breaking away from, because I think they look at socialism. I mean, they look at like just Bernie Sanders as like this completely unhinged human being. You know, they would much rather keep everything normal. I think those are the hardest people. I think that's like, going to be one of the biggest oppositions to the revolution.
And I mean, like, I think I touched on something interesting there because, like, I think we have to remember that, like, I think what you're saying is that, like, correct me if I'm misreading this, but like, reactionaries have a critique of society. It's just it's a critique that's, you know, says things aren't the way they used to be, and we need to you know, basically have a bad revolution, what we would call like a bad revolution. It's a revolution against whatever you want to call, like, it's I don't know. It feels a bad taste in my mouth even calling it, saying it's a revolution of anything. Like, but it's a critique of society that comes from the idea that things would be better if they were like they were in the old days.
Yeah, it's the same premise, and so like, and that's the thing is like liberalism to me is always just who is the status quo. So if the status quo happens to be like a conservative America and that becomes the cultural status quo, then those are the people that like, you know, that's generally like what happens. And the status quo represents a large constituency of the working class, and those are people that you're going to have to vouch for. I think it's a waste of time to like de-radicalize people on the right. I think it's a waste of time to meet and negotiate with fascists. I think it's a waste of time to convince racists to come back.
That's what fascism has been doing for decades now, you know?
Yeah.
They go radical and right wing, and then the liberal establishment goes like, okay, let's meet in between. Let's do us a Clinton. Okay, no, let's do us another Clinton. Let's do us an Obama, you know? And further to the right, there goes the Overton window.
Yeah, and the Overton window shifts all the time. And I think the most interesting part about America's Overton window is that it has shifted back and forth between left and right of center, but only slightly. But that Overton window is just enough. It's just enough that it can convince people how to do whatever politique they want to do. And I think a good example of that is the Dixiecrats and the Republican Party, like, switch in quotes. That's a really good example of sort of like how this Overton window, it doesn't really move. And I hear a lot of liberals and a lot of moderates say, oh, the Overton window is dramatically shifting left and right. And it's like, not really. It kind of sits in a very comfortable place. And I think we're reaching a point in politics where it's finally becoming uncomfortable to be complacent in that Overton window. And that it's, and I think that's the reason why a lot of these fascists and a lot of these right-wing people and even a lot of the liberals are scared. They don't want to lose things, because they definitely, both of them, feel that they're losing way more than they already have. And I think that's why a lot of liberalized culture gets so indoctrinated and like intertwined with fascism, is because they do rely on them to a substantial degree to sort of keep us from doing the things that we want to do, because to them, our view of society, or our view of a society, is scary to them. It's just too far left of that Overton, and there's always going to be that cohesiveness between both like modern social democracy reform and fascism, and a lot of people forget about that. And so when a lot of us say that, like, if you're a liberal, you're siding with the fascists, it's not that you are advocating for neo-Nazis, but you're advocating for institutions and systems that will 100%, be complacent with that, especially capitalism. And I think, and that's why I say that, like, when radical change happens, you have to pick a side. Moderates will defend to the death that sides can't be picked, but ultimately, politic and thought is created and decided on the axiom of extreme. Politics can only be decided by extremes. They are never ever successfully decided by moderates or mediaries. It's been proven. There's so many historical examples. I don't even want to go there, but um, and so Melody's saying something also really good. It's like big business also still coincided with FDR after the New Deal.
They were his biggest sponsors, actually.
Yeah, because if you keep these poor people from like doing anything ridiculous, and it's just complacency. Like it's handing out enough to keep the populace happy, but not having the main movers and shakers losing anything. These people are never going to lose anything. Like they have nothing to lose at this point. At this point, they have everything to gain. It's like when Melody said earlier, Jeff Bezos has got to be a trillionaire. At this point, it's just a zero-sum game for them. As long as they keep making profits, and as long as they secure those profits monetarily where it can't be touched and they can't be removed from power, it doesn't matter. Like we shouldn't be surprised that SpaceX is considered historic to these people, because to these people, the idea of progress can only be marred with the progress that we are making that leaves everybody behind. Because innovation to capitalists and innovation to the people that control power are what makes our society better. But most of the time, those things that make our society better never get to the people that need it most.
Yeah, when SpaceX is a disaster, the launch of the launch today with private company using the resources of the publicly funded NASA. That was rough for. It's like, let's institute private, and it's done. It has geopolitical interests in it. Like they're really going after Russia basically, because every launch to the ISS was done through Russian spaceships.
Which are more reliable.
Yeah, probably, but they don't have the fancy suits designed by this Hollywood costume designer.
Yeah, and like here's the thing is that like the big, so here's where I'll come in as somebody with a background in science, is to say like these super like I guess like techno-capitalist celebrants of people like Elon Musk will go on about how, the private enterprise is great for space travel because they're going to cut costs and because they're trying to make a profit and blah blah blah, but like that's actually what's been shown is that like they're actually more likely to cut corners on things that will ultimately like actually endanger the astronauts who actually will go on these trips. And hey, don't get me wrong, I think there's actually, just like in terms of like the science and engineering going into these things, I think it's remarkable. But like I think that that's kind of beside the point in this conversation, because we're talking about like who gets to make those decisions for us as like within our agency as a human subject, right? We're like I think we will at some point in human history, I think that space exploration and moving out beyond our tiny little rock out here is a very real possibility. But like I think that it's frankly just unconscionable in a situation where global capitalism still rules the way that society's economic decisions are carried out. And that means that like whenever we have the people's space agency or whatever ready to send rockets off to Mars or Europa or whatever, I think that'll be a much better, that's where I would prefer as a woman of science. That's where I would rather see these things go, not giving billionaires this false credibility of, oh, they're so smart and they're going to save us all. Like, no, fuck them. The real heroes here are the scientists and engineers and other workers who make these amazing machines happen, because they are absolutely marvels of modern science and engineering, but they're not. Those things don't happen because Elon Musk is like Tony Stark and he's a big genius.
Ah, don't get me started. Like fucking Elon Musk.
Elon
What?
Musk was Elon Musk was his entire wealth comes from blood diamonds. His
Yeah,
entire wealth
exactly.
comes from like black bodies. This is the shit
Fuck
that I'm
Elon
talking.
Musk.
This is the
Yeah.
shit that I'm talking about. Every little thing. These people are held as gods among men, and they've literally like this is the thing. We all fucking suffer for this.
I was
If you
so
are a
pissed
marginalized
off.
person, if you are a marginalized person, your every the success of these like white capitalists are built on the dead bodies of your ancestors, your family members, your land, your people. And like you shouldn't let people in your society praise them. They're just a bunch of liars. They don't do anything. They don't like Elon Musk he successfully like got his plant to work in that county in California because he threatened to move it because California makes fuck tons of money off of just him having it there. And so the county let him open his plant to make Teslas, even though there was an order for non-essential businesses to keep open. And he literally, because he is such a powerful person with his money, and because of his political leverage within that state, he got what he wanted.
Yeah, but before Tesla,
The
it
app
was
the
it was
the average the
skimming cents out of every transaction with PayPal, right?
the average person can't do that. The average person, when they even try to fight a traffic ticket, they lose. You know,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
can the leverage that these people have is undeniable. So like when we smash a Starbucks window and people get angry about it, they have the money to fix this. They'll fix it in a week or a day.
Yeah, for real. And like here's the thing is that, and I think a lot of maybe like Europeans or like just people from places outside the United States don't realize just what one of the things about our legal system that is so fucked up is that like yeah, we technically have this like guaranteed to a trial by jury of peers, but a vast majority of cases do not even go to trial. Most cases are settled like as like some kind of like plea bargain. I think I don't know the legal jargon, but you know, like they don't even go to trial. And people, especially people who are in who are
They settle out of court.
yeah, well, yeah, so the vast majority of people would rather like accept like a like they'll accept a sentence a guilty they'll take a guilty plea over just over going to trial because the guilty plea will usually contain some guarantee like the sentence will only be like 1 year in prison or something, versus if they go to trial there's a potential that if they're found guilty that they'll get a sentence that's like 10 years or something. So vast majority of people who are either because they're economically disadvantaged or racial, like they're in one of the racial categories that's systematically oppressed, especially black people, they in most cases settle for the guilty plea rather than going to trial. And I mean that's true of cases in general, but it's disproportionately true for black and brown people in this country.
Yeah, no, nobody gets rich by working hard. That's a fucking lie. You get rich by stealing from people, whether it's their surplus value or getting to those very bigger schemes where you fuck people over just to get richer. So fuck that shit. I mean, feed the rich to your motherfucking cat. Feed them.
And I think it's so hard because like and the thing is like a lot of black and brown people they don't fight courts because they know that if they try and fight them, they lose. They don't even bother. Like the justice system is so skewed against people like me and especially people that are black in America that there's no successful reciprocity for any of our actions. And that's the thing that I try and tell people like every single day is that if you are a non person of color in America, it's literally impossible for you to actually successfully get a case and win and actually get something that's worth it to people. You know?
Yeah, and who are the judges and who makes the laws? Who make the laws? Some white old man, totally subtracted from fucking reality, and they write them fucking laws on fucking papers because they don't give a fuck about us.
Well, another thing is you can't expect a black and brown judge to have sympathy because they have obviously taken the side of the oppressor. They have to follow the law, and if the law is written by cishet white men, then there's no choice for them.
Yeah, they're just cops in costumes.
They can't do anything.
Yeah, cop is just a judge is just a cop with some kind of tunic bullshit that they wear because they're supposed to signify they're different, they're quote unquote better. Fuck them judges, and fuck them cops, and fuck those laws that are fucking rotten. There should be laws that are ethical, that are based on human rights, not on property, not on the principle of property. When property has more value than human life, fuck your system, fuck your laws. Simple as that. Sorry, I tend to simplify.
No, you're okay.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I mean, that's what it's about.
So what's legal and what's not legal? It's fucking relative. What's ethical and what's not ethical? Now we're talking. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, I'm getting worked up.
I mean, you can say judges and cops under communism, but that's still incomparable.
Yeah, but communism is accountable. There are councils of people who decide. Collectively.
We need to stop getting rid of the idea. We need to also remove the idea that these terms mean the same thing. A judge in a capitalist country is a judge. A judge in a communist country is still a judge. Now, what that person does is different. We could get into a whole discourse about is a cop under the Chinese Communist Party still a cop? Do you still say a cop in the same sense? And I would argue that you can't, because people need to stop doing these one-for-one comparison ratios of situations in other countries because they're just not comparable.
Yeah, and judges apply laws, and it's the set of laws that makes the difference. When a law binds a judge to be just, because they're under a regulation that say, hey, you do the right thing, motherfucker. Then they have no escape, and whoever wants to be a judge under those systems is because they're motivated to do the right thing. But judges under the current mode of production and under the current mode of society, like capitalist bullshit, it's just they like to be powerful. They like to be better than bullshit, and you'll hear many judges excusing themselves. It's like, we have the laws that we have to work with, and we just have to apply it, to excuse themselves when they do something shitty. But matter of fact is they don't give a fuck, because at the end of the day, the people go to jail or not, or they get their fines and their punishment because it's a punitive system. That's another one, and they go home and have a good life. And they go to a whorehouse or whatever right-wing people go, and that's that's the reality of the things. Judges are, in the current systems, are abstracted from the reality, and they're not. In the United States, they're a little bit more accountable because they're elected. In many countries like mine, they're not even elected. So fuck them. Sorry.
No, it's good. No, anger is good. I'm about anger. I love anger.
Organize your anger.
Always. No, I love anger. I will I'll never say no to people that are angry.
I need to make that episode one of these days, describing the new gulags. I have a wonderful design for gulags, in which we implement a justice that is not punitive. It's all about therapy sessions, it's like rehab, but really nice, and people are treated humanely. It's a new style of gulag. It's fantastic. You separate, the ones that had made they just screwed up in their lives and made a mistake, and you just ease them back into being
Yeah, people
citizens.
people just want to be in society. I think that's the thing that's the most complicated thing about the situation is I think most people just want to be reintegrated back in society.
Yeah.
They don't want to be told that they want to be told that they made a mistake and that they can change.
And the
You
ones that
know.
are not fixable, because there's a number of sociopathic people running around, that they have no fixing. We'll put them comfortably in some kind of like, those pools with plastic balls in them that they put children to. just leave them there, harmless, isolated from the rest of society, but leading a nice, regular life. No punishment, no bullshit.
Yeah, people don't always there's just so many things I think we can do. And I am a big believer in restorative justice. I do think anyone can necessarily I don't think everyone is inherently a bad person. I think conditionally we create people due to the way our society functions. And if there are people that we find out through science or through whatever that are actually just lost, that doesn't mean we discard them. We just have to come up with a solution that actually isn't, gross and filled with eugenics or throwing someone in a completely different part of society and abandoning them. These are all things that we have to eventually work for, and it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's all going to be things that are going to take time.
Yeah. Okay. So, good people, I think we've been running for 2 hours and a half. Time flies when you're having fun. You, my dear ladies, you want to wrap it up?
I can stick around for a little while longer, but this is, your stream, your rules, so.
Yeah, I'm actually okay to keep going if there's anything you want to.
It's just that it's like super long, like 2 hours and a half. It's a lot.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Like,
well,
if people are gonna watch it, what we could do is make more of these. I really like chatting with you people.
Yeah, it's fun. Had a
Yeah.
good time today.
Time
Yeah,
flies
happy
when
to
this is
come
not a
back
debate,
anytime.
I came up with this thing, to call debates competitive conversation.
Ugh,
I
I
they
cringe
suck
just
like
hearing
that.
it.
Yeah, they suck like that. They're really awful. So this is not a debate. It's just a conversation where we're hanging out and having a good time and fixing the world because we like it like that. We're leftist.
Yeah, I like fixing the world.
Yeah, right? It needs
I'm
a lot of fixing.
I'm about fixing the world always. I do believe in that.
So let's fix it together, family. So good to
I
have
don't
you
think
on.
we'd be communists if we weren't.
Yeah, right?
If we didn't think radical change is possible, then we wouldn't be fucking communists.
Yeah. There's nothing I'd rather be. This is coming from someone who was on the other side.
Yes.
The other side is fucking miserable.
Yes. Poor people, and then in a way they're enemies of all that's good in life, but poor people, they're in a really bad place, and many of them, they can be rescued by whoever is good at it. Not all of us are good at it. I'm not good at it, but I'm sure there's really good people that are good at de-radicalizing these people, and it's
definitely something that will take time, and we will get there. A lot of it is just changing that culture, moving things around, getting people to realize that this world needs to get better, because if we don't, everyone loses. You know what I mean? It's not just one singular group of people that loses. It's we all will lose.
Yeah, human rights, family, human rights. It's not so difficult. At the end of the day, it's not so difficult in its essence. You have anything you want to say or want to plug or something personal to say? Just say it now.
I don't. I'm so bad at this.
No
I can do
worries.
it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll plug. So, once again, name is Melody, she, her pronouns. My channel is called A World to Win. You can find it at youtube.com/c/A World to Win. You can find me on Twitter at A World to Win 1. And if you like my channel and you want to see more Marxist educational videos on history and philosophy and whatnot, consider supporting me financially through Patreon at patreon.com/aworldtowin. And thank you for having me on, Javi.
It's wonderful having you on, and it was a great idea. I remember you suggested it in a couple of streams that we were running for some reason, and it was like, yeah, let's do this. It's good to find the time. We need to do more of these. The Mels.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
We never
Marxist Leninist trans women,
both named Mel.
both named Mel.
What a time to be alive.
I love it. It's a wonderful coincidence, and I love it. I just love it because it's you people. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for this.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite coincidence.
Yes, it was a very happy one. Okay, good people. I'm gonna end up the stream right here, right now. Or have a great one. I'm sorry that I get tired. I'm old, so after 2 hours and a half of streaming, it's a lot. But we'll do more of these. So stay tuned. More fun and games soon. Thank you very much for showing up, everyone in the chat, and have a lot of fun. Nighty.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
And we're off the air.